So the remaster is here and a bunch of people have it in their hands. And on the 15th of November, Paizo had an errata drop that gave errata for the player core and GM core, as well as a bunch of older books in order to bring things forward until player core 2 and other changes as well. One of the big things that they did is they did some errata for the player core handbook as well as the advanced player's guide. And this specifically gives a lot of information about the champion, both good and evil. So in this particular video, we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. Now, this was taken from a very long live, and rather than have everybody try to search through that live stream on video on demand, I'm kind of parsing that video out into different sections. Like I said, this one is going to cover the Player's Core Handbook as well as the Advanced Player's Guide. But with that, let's go ahead and get into it. So my name is Don. I'm trying to be the theSlyStrategist, and let's go ahead and get into it. Now we can go ahead and jump into Pathfinder Core Rulebook Errata. And to go to Pathfinder Core Rulebook Errata, I'll bring up my Pathfinder Core Rulebook. So this is where it starts into the champion. So for me, when we get to whatever you want to ask, feel free. But the removal of alignment necessitates some major changes for the champion class. You can use the following general fixes to play under the remastered rules until the revised class is released in Player Core 2. The tenets of evil and related causes for evil champions appear in the remaster compatibility errata for the Advanced Player's Guide. So we'll be going through both of these back to back. Pages 106, 107. And you're going to see when we go through a lot of this is removing good and evil, good creatures, evil creatures, things along those lines. A lot of these changes are going to involve just that. So let's go to page 106. Page 106, class feat and deity and cause class feature require the most difficult fixes as they rely the most on your character's alignment and your deity's follower alignments. The tenets of your champion's code. There is a lot of things that I could just read to you, but let's see if we can't summarize it a little bit, because like I said, this is going to be a very long section. So if you do happen to mess up with your edicts and anathemas, then you could potentially lose the bonuses you get for being a champion, the boons you get, the things you get from your deity. So as it says here, when you violate your champion-related anathema, you can choose a tenet of good only if your deity allows you to be sanctified as holy. Now, sanctified is that trait where you can add that damage type to spirit damage. If you aren't sanctified, then when you do something that has spirit damage, you only get the spirit damage, not any of the sanctification damage that you would normally get, holy or unholy. So if the god doesn't allow either sanctification, you can't be a champion of that god. As an exception, if you could follow a certain champion cause before the remaster, you can still choose that cause along with related tenets, of course, for that specific deity. If your deity isn't presented in player core, work with your GM. So this would be a case, and there's tons of those where you have like the pantheons and some of the other things that are available in Pathfinder Society or some of the other APs or some of the other books. Work with the GM in order to kind of figure out what the edicts and anathemas would be for that particular deity. But all that being said, we'll go ahead and get into the tenets of faith and then the deity and cause as well on this page. Once again, there are a lot of changes that are coming up here. So you need to replace tenets of good with the following text. So this whole text goes away. I am going to read this. One of the reasons why I read this is because I do actually have some people who very distinctly tell me that they just listen to this as opposed to watching it. So some sections, if it's small enough, I'll read the entire thing, and this would be one of them. Tenets of good. You gain the holy trait and add that trait to any strikes you make. In addition to your other edicts and anathema, you gain the following. Edicts. Do not knowingly harm innocents or fail to prevent harm to an innocent if your direct intervention could save them. Anathema, commit murder, engage in torture. Then we have on pages 106 and 107, and they're basically talking about deity and cause right here, which spans 106 and 107. You need to change the text for the three causes that the champion must follow. The tenets of good in the core rulebook, they are no longer strictly prescribed by alignment. So Paladin, you're honorable, forthright, and committed to pushing back. Hey, Waffles, how's it going? On the Paladin, you're honorable, forthright, and committed to pushing back the forces of cruelty. You gain the Retributive Strike, Champion's Reaction, and Lay on Hands Devotion spell. Your code gains the following edicts and anathema: follow the law, respect legitimate authorities or leadership, and take advantage of another or cheat. So for your Paladin, you're pretty much the lawful good one, even though that doesn't exist anymore. Yes, some deities lost access to champions. That's by rule how they're playing it is if you're, let's go back up to that section. So if your god doesn't allow either sanctification, you can't be a champion of that god, which, so Nethys, no. There's other ones, and then there's some that don't care, and those I'm sure you could still do. But there are the gods who are true neutral, who don't allow sanctification. And I mean, there could be other cases as well, but generally speaking, it's going to be your true neutral. Now, not all of them. I don't want to I'm making generalizations. That's probably bad because I'm going to get comments later that tell me, well, this one. But yeah, if it doesn't allow sanctification, then you can't be a champion for that god. And that could require some actual retconning of characters. If in mid-campaign, you need to go and look at a champion or looking at a champion that a player has made, they actually might need to retcon their god, which would be easier than trying to change them into another class. However, GM discretion, and that's kind of how it goes. In a lot of cases, I personally would allow, let's say a champion of Nethys. I'd allow a champion of Nethys in order to continue to play a champion of Nethys in a remaster version. Just kind of flavor it. Why are you crying? So we did Paladin. Paladin was your lawful good. Now we go Redeemer. Redeemer, you're full of kindness and forgiveness. You gain Glimpse of Redemption, Champion's Reaction, which is a great reaction, and the Lay on Hands Devotion spell. Your code gains the following edicts and anathema: try to redeem those who commit wicked deeds, show compassion to others regardless of their authority or station. Anathema is kill a sapient enemy without first offering a chance at redemption. Once again, this used to be kind of like your neutral good. Doesn't exist anymore, because you're doing edicts and anathemas in order to replace that. Then you have the Liberator. Liberator, you defend the freedom of others. You gain Liberating Step, Champion's Reaction. Still good, but not as good as Glimpse of Redemption. And Lay on Hands Devotion spell. Your code gains the following edicts and anathemas: oppose slavery and tyranny, fight for others' freedom to make their own decisions, respect choices others make for their own lives. And anathema is force or threaten someone to act a certain way, engage in slavery or tyranny. Yeah, Waffles, that's a good idea. That's kind of what I was saying before, is I would probably allow my current champion to continue to play until the next AP or next adventure or next campaign. Because retconning kind of isn't fun. Okay, now we're going to go on to, that is basically, let me sum that up a little bit. So we just kind of covered the deity and cause. And that would be for all your goods: lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good for Liberator. Since alignment doesn't work anymore, you do the edicts and anathemas in order to replace that. Now we are on Divine Smite on 108. So let's go down to 108. Divine Smite. Now you're going to see a lot of these changes are simply to replace good damage with holy, evil damage with unholy. But Divine Smite class, replace all instances of persistent good damage with persistent spirit damage. I take that back. I did say that wrong. I said holy and unholy. That's only if you're sanctified. You replace good and evil basically with spirit damage, and unholy and holy comes along if you're sanctified. Many of the champion class feats in the core rulebook need to be changed to be compatible with the remaster. So let's go ahead and look at that. Page 110. Fiend's Bane Oath. Actually, they are talking about Dragon Slayer Oath, which once again, I missed one. So Dragon Slayer Oath. Dragon Slayer Oath, replace the description with the following text: you're sworn to slay wicked and nefarious dragons. You gain the following edict: you must slay dragons whose actions are in direct opposition to your deity's edicts when you encounter them, as long as you have a reasonable chance of success. Your Retributive Strike gains a +4 circumstance bonus to damage against a dragon, or +6 if you have Master Efficiency with the weapon you used. Your Glimpse of Redemption's resistance against a dragon from a dragon is 7 plus your level. If you use Liberating Step triggered by a dragon, your ally gains a +4 circumstance bonus to checks granted by your Liberating Step, and the ally can step twice afterwards. You don't consider dragons whose actions are in direct opposition to your deity's edicts to be legitimate authorities, even in nations they rule. So basically, all of this needs to be changed and changed to the new thing. Once again, and I'll say this just another time because I did read a section there. I do get comments all the time that people like it when I do read sections because some people just listen to this as opposed to actually watching it. So if it's small enough, I'll read it. Then we have Fiend's Bane Oath Feat. Add the following tenant to your champion's code after the other tenants with you gain the following edict. So you're going to replace this, you gain the following edict. In addition, replace a good fiend with fiend that isn't unholy. So this line right here is the one that needs to be changed. Then you have Shining Oath Feat. So in the Shining Oath Feat, it's the same exact thing as it was for Fiend's Bane Oath. In the Shining Oath Feat, add the following tenant to your champion's code after other tenants with you gain the following edict. And you replace Good Undead, which is interesting with undead that isn't unholy. Oh, I was about to say a name for an AP that I probably shouldn't for a good undead. They exist. Not a lot of them. Then we have page 111, which is Vengeful Oath. So Vengeful Oath is another one where you were going to replace the entire text of that particular feat. In Vengeful Oath, you sworn an oath to hunt down wicked evildoers and bring them to judgment. You gain the following edict. You must hunt down and exterminate creatures that have committed heinous atrocities. You can use Lay on Hands to damage a creature you witness harming an innocent or an ally as if it were undead. In this case, Lay on Hands deals spirit damage instead of vitality damage and gains the holy trait. This doesn't prevent you from healing such a creature with Lay on Hands. You choose whether to heal or harm. So that still exists even if you have Vengeful Oath. But this entire text from the player handbook for 2E needs to be changed. Then we go on to 112, Spite Evil. This is another one where you're pretty much just changing a good damage to spirit damage if the target is unholy. Because once again, that's kind of the big change, is good or evil is now spirit damage with a sanctified trait if it applies. Then we go on to the Sense Evil feat. So on page 113. Sense Evil, you're replacing another entire block of text. Sense Evil, you are basically now saying you sense evil as a queasy or foreboding feeling. You detect unholy creatures as a vague sense similar to human sense of smell. An unholy creature using a disguise or otherwise trying to hide its presence attempts a deception check against your perception DC to hide its unholiness from you. If the creature succeeds at its deception check, it is then temporarily immune to your sense evil for a whole day. Now, if you look at the original text, all those things were similar, but enough of that paragraph needed to be replaced. They just decided to replace the whole paragraph. You also get in the Radiant Blade spell feat, which is or Radiant Blade Spirit feat. You now are going to change the last sentence to replace flaming and aligned properties, anarchic, axiomatic, holy and unholy to match your cause alignment with flaming, holy if you're holy, and unholy if you're unholy. Good news about this one is no one has to try to pronounce axiomatic right after saying anarchic at the same time. That's incredibly difficult to actually say. Then you have Aura of Faith. That feat, you're basically going to be replacing your strikes deal an extra 1 good damage against evil creatures. Also, each good aligned ally within 15 feet gains this benefit on their first strike hits. It hits an evil creature each round. You're basically going to be replacing that with, instead of good damage, you're going to be saying spirit damage against unholy creatures, and each willing ally within 15 feet gains the benefit on their first strike that hits an unholy creature as opposed to an evil creature. So those are your changes to Aura of Faith, and Blade of Justice is pretty much the same. So Blade of Justice feat, replace all instances of evil with unholy and all instances of good damage with spirit damage. So you're basically going to be doing that 2 evils and a good damage in order to kind of remaster Blades of Justice. Next, we are going to be moving on to Aura of Righteousness. Aura of Righteousness, you can see that last sentence right there, which is gain evil resistance. So you're going to replace that with gain resistance 5 to unholy. Once again, you're going to be seeing this change a lot. Anytime you see good or evil, it's just going to be changed to holy or unholy. And Celestial Mount feature, 20th level. I've never seen anybody get Celestial Mount, but I'd love to play with someone that actually had that. And the Celestial Mount feat replace weakness 10 to evil damage with weakness 10 to unholy. Once again, more of a verbiage change. Then we do 316. So now we're starting to get into the spells. And 316, Acid Splash Cantrip. You're going to replace the heightened entries with the following text. So all of these are going to go away, and heightened third becomes the initial damage increases to 2d6 and the persistent damage increases to 2. Initial damage increases to 3d6 for heightened 5. The persistent damage increases to 3 and splash damage increases to 2. Heightened 7 is the initial damage increases to 4d6, persistent damage increases to 4, and splash damage increases to 3. And heightened 9th, initial damage increases to 5d6, persistent damage increases to 5, and the splash damage increases to 4. Is it a nerf to the champion? Kind of. We're going to see a lot more once we get to the advanced player's guide. But I'm not going to argue your point. I can see it being one. I don't feel that. I don't like that they took away some deities having champions. I'll say that. But are there some nerfs to it? Maybe, but they're the same nerfs that are happening to a lot of Magic users, truthfully, with the spell DC having different levels that you used to be able to have, and now, like, you might have had one that you specialized in, and Primal wasn't the one you specialized in, so that's fine if it's lower. Now you just have a unified one, but it also boosts up the lower. It's a tough call for Medius, and that one I'm not entirely sure about. 331 is our next page. Disrupt Undead. So, Disrupt Undead, replace 1d6 positive damage plus your spell ability modifier with 2d6 vitality. Another verbiage change because you don't have positive damage anymore, you have vitality. And instead of doing a spell casting ability modifier, which is static, now you add another die, so it's the potential to actually get a higher damage is there, but you can also get lower than you could have before. And you're going to see this through and through a lot of spells now. So Disrupt Undead, then we go to 337. False Life. So False Life, it did read a number of temporary hit points equal to 6 plus your spell casting ability modifier. Another change because that ability modifier is going away. Now it's 10 temporary hit points as opposed to 6 plus your spell casting ability modifier. That one goes a little bit opposite because now you get a defined number, but you could potentially have gotten higher before because it was sort of defined here, except for spellcasting ability modifier changed as you leveled. But now you get 10, just kind of as a base. 360. 360, Produce Flame. Produce Flame cantrip. Replace fire damage equal to 1d4 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. Same thing. It's going to be 2d4 fire damage instead of the spellcasting ability modifier. They just added another die. 362 is going to be the same exact way. We'll just scroll down real quick since it's a page. It was 1d4 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. Now it is 2d4. Anytime you see spellcasting ability modifier, that's going to go away and basically be replaced in general by a die the same size as the original die. 373. 373 is Spiritual Weapon. So Spiritual Weapon, replace force damage equal to 1d8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier, which is right here. Now it is going to be 2d8 force damage. Once again, just removing that spellcasting ability modifier. 384, same thing. But I said I was going to go through line by line, so we're going through line by line. Weapon of Judgment. All right, here it was force damage equal to 3d10 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. Now it is just going to be 4d10. 388, another bigger champion change. So let's go to 388. Litany against Sloth. So replace the target's entry of one evil creature to one creature that isn't holy. In Litany Against Wrath, replace the target's one evil creature with one creature that isn't holy. In addition, replace all instances of good creatures with creature that isn't unholy. And all instances of 3d6 good damage with 3d6 spirit damage. And in Litany of Righteousness, where you see that weakness 7 to good is now going to be weakness 7 to holy. So once again, this is all just changes to the verbiage. And the reason why I'm going a little bit slow is because it's not quite that. This is where I agree with you saying it's a nerf for champion, because you have to be sanctified for holy or unholy to matter, generally speaking. So that's kind of how I see that. Now we're going to go to page 401 for the last one in the player handbook, which is Key Strike for Monk. For Key Strike, it did read, this damage can be any of the following types of your choice, chosen each time you strike. Force, lawful, only if you're lawful, negative, or positive. None of that is good in the remaster. Well, force is. But now it is force, lawful. Sorry. Now you're going to be changing it to damage can be any of the following types of your choice, chosen each time you strike. Force is still there, but it's spirit, vitality, or void, because lawful, any of that type of damage is now spirit. Negative is void, and positive is vitality. That's where we are on champion. Now, that isn't the end of the champion changes. For the rest of the champion changes, we are going to go to the Advanced Player's Guide. And they have the same kind of disclaimer on the Advanced Player's Guide here. Removal of alignment necessitates some major changes for the champion class, and they give us a bunch of rules for it, a bunch of changes for it until Player Core 2 comes out. So we're going to go to evil champions, basically, in this book. And now we're going to do the tenets of evil. So once again, I'll read this particular section and then we'll kind of go through the evil causes. So tenets of evil, you gain the unholy trait and that trait to any strikes that you make. In addition to your other edicts and anathema, you gain the following. None of these prevent you from performing acts others might consider helpful, but these acts must be done with the expectation that they ultimately further your own goals and those of your deity. The edict is, do not put others' needs before your own or those of your deity. Anathema, commit an entirely altruistic act, such as giving something away in charity. Thanks a lot, OGL owner. Yeah, exactly. We'll leave that OGL owner in quotes, because a lot of these changes are verbiage changes. And once again, I can kind of see where the champion's being nerfed a bit. It's a weird one. I don't want to say it is until I play it. And that's my meanwhile character is I have a champion sitting there. But anyways, let's go ahead and get to the Tyrant, because this is, unfortunately, I got to read these. So Tyrant was your lawful evil. That is now going to read, might makes right, and you subjugate the weak to keep them in their proper place. You gain the Iron Command, Champion's Reaction, and Touch of Corruption Devotion spell. You gain the following edicts and anathema. Edicts enforce proper hierarchies, topple illegitimate hierarchies, and lead when you are most suited to the task. Once again, this is your lawful evil. And your anathema is let one who is lesser than you wield power over you or lead you. Man, I like the Tyrant. There's a lot of flavor there. If you want to play, there's a lot of flavor to play a Tyrant. I do like them. Desecrator. Desecrator was right here, neutral evil. Desecrator, you always take what pleases you, no matter who it hurts, and you spread your evil influence across all you touch. You gain the Selfish Shield, Champion's Reaction, and Touch of Corruption Devotion spell. You gain the following edicts and anathema. Subvert or corrupt everything in your path. This is edicts, sorry. Subvert or corrupt everything in your path that is pure or holy. Sow doubt. among those holding ideals of purity or holiness, and no anathemas. I guess if you're neutral evil, you can do, or, who cares whether you do it or not. Then you have the anti-paladin. Anti-paladin, you're dishonorable. Oh, anti-paladin was chaotic evil. Chaotic evil right here. So the anti-paladin, you're dishonorable, dishonest, and committed to breaking the false hopes of kindness. You gain the destructive vengeance champion's reaction and touch of corruption devotion spell. You gain the following edicts and anathema. Edicts: destroy that which offends you or stands in your way, take advantage of others, cheat, steal. Those are things you have to do. Anathema: bind yourself with a law other than what your deity requires. So only what your deity says. So those are the basics of your evil champions. You had your good champions in Player's Handbook and your evil ones in this one. Now we're going to go through sort of the same exercise we went through with the good champions, but we're going to be doing in the Advanced Player's Guide. So let's go ahead and go to 117. Iron Command. Letter of the law. Yes, sir. So for Iron Command, you basically, they're talking about in Iron Command, Selfish Shield and Destructive Vengeance reactions. The extra damage on your strikes is your choice of Spirit or Void instead of Evil or Negative. So in each one of these, Iron Command, Selfish Shield, and Destructive Vengeance, which I did not highlight, it would be Evil or Negative. Evil or Negative. Evil or Negative is now Spirit or Void, and also Divine Smite. Divine Smite class feature: replace all instances of persistent evil damage with persistent spirit damage. So you'll be going through for Tyrant, Desecrator, and Anti-Paladin and changing persistent evil to persistent spirit. And then they also have champion class feats that need to be changed. Once again, this is because of the evil. We're going to be doing the same thing we did with the good champion, and that would be changing all the rules there. So we'll go to page 118 and look at Esoteric Oath. So, Esoteric Oath. Once again, I'll read it for those who are just listening, but this is the descriptor and the following text. You've sworn an oath to slay the alien abominations that lurk in the remote corners of Galarion and prey on the weak. You gain the following edict. You must slay aberrations whose actions are in direct opposition to your deity's edicts when you encounter them, as long as you have a reasonable chance of success. Your Retributive Strike gains a +4 circumstance bonus to damage against an aberration, or +6 if you have master proficiency with the weapon you used. Your Glimpse of Redemption's resistance against damage from an aberration is 7 plus your level. If you use Liberating Step, triggered by an aberration, your ally gains a +4 circumstance bonus to checks granted by your Liberating Step, and the ally can step twice afterwards. Also, you don't consider aberrations whose actions are in direct opposition to your deity's edicts to be legitimate authorities, even in nations they rule. A lot of talking. Thank you very much, Grins. I appreciate it. So a lot of that text is similar, but there was enough changes because they had to change it to the new wording of the remaster, so they just replaced that whole entire thing. All the rest of these, and there aren't that many because it's all dealing with champion feats, are pretty much going to be just verbiage. We're going to go through them all, but that is what we're doing. You can just scroll down actually for this one. So in the Corrupted Shield feat right here, replace negative trait with the void trait. Replace the attacker takes 1d6 evil or negative damage, your choice, with the attacker takes 1d6 void damage. So this is going to change. Oh, I hit the wrong thing. 1d6 evil or negative damage, your choice. Then we go to Smite Good. So in the Smite Good feat, replace deal an extra 4 evil damage to deal an extra 4 spirit damage if the target is holy. So once again, where we get to the holy, unholy, sanctified thing, it's going to be in all the champions. And I really can't wait till Player Core 2 comes out. Then we go to 120, Sense Good. This is another big reading. So in Sense Good, we're going to be changing all this text right here to: the presence of goodness sickens you with its saccharine self-righteousness. You detect holy creatures as a vague sense, similar to human sense of smell. A holy creature using a disguise or otherwise trying to hide its presence attempts a deception check against your perception DC to hide its holiness from you. If the creature succeeds at its deception check, It is then temporarily immune to your sense good for a day. So that whole thing is going to change. It sounds remarkably similar to sense evil that it was before. I think it's kind of it would have been funny if they would have changed like sense good to sense holy and sense evil to sense unholy, but they didn't. It's still sense good because as a wider concept, they still exist, I guess. Then we move on to amplifying touch. Amplifying touch, we are going to be changing 1 additional good damage on all their strikes with deals 1 additional spirit damage on all their strikes. And you add the following sentence at the end. In addition, all their strikes are holy until the end of next turn. So that is what you're going to be changing in Amplifying Touch. Now we do page 121 in Fiendish Mount. Once again, super similar to good because they had their own mount in that one on the 20th level. So Fiendish Mount feat, replace weakness 10 to good damage with weakness 10 to holy. Once again, just a verbiage change. And then we have Sacred Defender. So in the Sacred Defender, replace evil creatures with unholy creatures and good creatures with holy. So these 2 little things here are going to change. I do really recommend, and I said it at the beginning, and I'll probably say it maybe one more time before we get to the next couple books. But if you actually bring this up in the actual Adobe PDF reader or a good PDF reader that you like, as opposed to a browser, you can highlight and save, and that way it'll save the highlight. So when you're going back to read all these things, you'll know when you get to something that you've already looked at an errata for, you'll know that it actually has errata just by having the highlights in there. Then we're going to go to Shadow Dancer Archetype, which is going to be on page 193. So a whole new section. So we're out of champion and into other things now. In the Shadow Dancers archetype, Shadow Illusion Focus Spell, replace 2d8. I'm pausing here for a second because, gosh darn it, I didn't highlight something. There's a few I didn't highlight. I went through this whole thing a little bit earlier, but I missed some. Shadow Illusion Focus Spell, replace 2d8 damage plus your spellcasting ability modifier with 3d8 damage. So that is what's going to be changing there. And then 227. How did I miss this? Oh, I didn't. There it is. 227, Wall of Flesh spell. Replace piercing damage equal to 1d6 plus your spellcasting attack modifier. Spellcasting attack modifiers are going away, or they're not going to be used. So now it is just replace that with a die of the same size. So instead of 1d6, it is now 2d6 piercing damage. 228. We're back to champion. I thought we were going to do bard, but I forgot that's something else. So champion, Litany of Depravity. Right now it says targets 1 good creature and target gains a weakness 7 to evil. That is going to be changing to 1 creature that isn't unholy and weakness 7 to unholy. So those are your changes to that particular focus spell. Then on 236 for Established Ward. And I've never actually cast this spell, now that I think about it. I never had anybody that used it. So, Established Ward, focus spell, deal bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage equal to 2d8 plus your spell casting ability modifier. Once again, that's going away as a type of damage. So, it's now add another die. So, 3d8 bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage. And that is everything that's in the Advanced Player's Guide as well as in the Player Handbook. So I hope you like this little look into the errata for the Player Core Handbook as well as the Advanced Player's Guide. It gives a lot of good information into the changes for Champion as well as some other changes from the older book, so you can go ahead and start bringing some of those concepts into your game now before the drop of Player Core 2. But as I mentioned, I hope you did like this video, and if you did, feel free to like, subscribe, or hit that notification bell. But whatever you do, have a great day and happy adventuring. Thanks.